Alright gang, what we're going to do is solve a polynomial inequality. Here it says solve the inequality f of x is greater than or equal to 0. So right out of the gate, let's interpret this inequality symbol. Greater than would mean above, and then as we learned in a previous video, 0 means x-axis. So we want to figure out the x values that make the graph of f of x above the x-axis, and the bar underneath the inequality symbol means that we can include any of the points that are on the x-axis themselves. So it gives us the equation for the function x plus 1 times quantity x minus 2 squared. And that's helpful because it allows us to identify the zeros, or in other words, the x-intercepts. If we take the factor x plus 1 and set it equal to 0, we get a 0 of x equals negative 1. And if we set the pair of x minus 2's equal to 0, we get x equals 2 as a 0 of multiplicity 2. So to tie sort of that stuff in, negative 1 shows up as a 0 one time, so that's why the graph is crossing at negative 1 right here. Whereas 2 shows up as a 0 twice, so it's even multiplicity, which is why the graph touches at the second x-intercept of x equals 2. So with regard to solving the inequality, we want the part or parts of the graph of f of x that are above the x-axis. And it looks like we have a piece that is between negative 1 and 2, going from quadrant 2 to quadrant 1. The graph is actually on the x-axis at x equals 2, but to the right of x equals 2, we're seeing a continuation of a piece going above the x-axis. So I'm going to ditch the highlighting real quick. So for this little bump that's from negative 1 to positive 2, the x values that correspond to that are precisely those from negative 1 to positive 2. We can include the negative 1, and we can also include the 2 by virtue of the bar underneath the inequality symbol. And then the other part of the graph of f of x that's above the x-axis is that part that's from 2 all the way down to positive infinity. And we would be able to bracket the 2 as well. So notice that 2 is bracketed twice. What that means is 2 is involved in both sections of the shading, ultimately meaning that the solutions don't break up at 2. So there's not going to be two pieces to the interval notation here. It's going to be one nice interval, and that interval is going to be from bracket negative 1 all the way down to positive infinity. Alright, so again, we can include the 2 in both intervals. Basically, there's an overlap at 2, which essentially sort of glues the intervals together, creating one nice uniform piece of that part of the x-axis. And that piece would go from negative 1 all the way down to positive infinity, bracket on the negative 1, parentheses on the infinity. Okay, so if you need more clarification, feel free to let me know, and I'll be more than happy to provide it. Otherwise, that's where this solution ends. So thanks again for watching another one of these videos, and I'll see you in the next one.